Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Rotors Magazine. We're going to be doing this one a little bit different than normal. The main reason is because I've been in the RX7 community for a while, and I see a lot of people talking about swapping 20Bs into their car. And one of the first questions that you typically get from an RX7 enthusiast is, I want to 3-rotor swap my car because I saw it on the internet. And I just wanted to address something that a lot of newer people and people that maybe aren't too privy to rotaries don't quite get. And that's that a 20B is not a common modification, nor is it really an easy one. It's not a cheap one. There's a whole bunch of things behind the 20B, and every time that someone asks me a question about a 20B, I pretty much just take it with a grain of salt because I know what they're gonna be told is something they're not gonna like. So I want to make this video kind of to be that answer to people, so I don't have to necessarily reply to this question every time, just so I can put this out there so people can see it. So the first thing that I want to address before we get into the details and the educational bit is that 20Bs are not as common as you see on the internet. There are plenty of people on the internet that have 20Bs. You see them on Facebook, you see them on big YouTuber channels, you see them everywhere. You see a lot of 20Bs everywhere. That being said, 20B population in the RX7 community is like the 1%. The 20B is the holy grail of the rotary engine from the factory. It is the absolute epitome, minus like custom building the 4-rotor, but from the Mazda engines, the 20B is the epitome of the rotary engine. So when you see a 20B engine in an RX7, you need to appreciate it for what it is, because the 20B in the RX7 is no easy feat. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of patience. So the first thing I want everyone to know about the 20B is that it is really fucking expensive to put into a car. Like way more expensive than most people think. A lot of people go, well, you know, like swapping a car like into an RX7 is pretty cheap. It's gonna be probably like $6 or $7 grand. They look at the engines, they look at the long blocks, go, it's kind of like when you look at Hondas and people want a K-series swap Hondas, go, oh, the block's $1,000, so it's about a $2,000 swap. That's not the case. For a 20B, you're looking at about $20,000 at the minimum to put the motor into an FD. And that's to do it right, not necessarily like taking a stock engine and stock ECU and stock harnesses and kind of doing like half-assing it. I mean, like, if you want to have an engine that's going to last you, it's going to make power, and you want to make sure it's 100% reliable and gone through, and you make sure it's fully sorted, $20,000, and that's not big power. That's not. That's just like a mildly modified 20B to get into the car. Now, the reason it's going to cost you $20,000 is, first and foremost, the long block is going to cost you around $10,000 to $12,000 to get going correctly. The reason for that is because you're going to buy a long block. You can find them on eBay or whatever from an import. I highly would not recommend buying a 20B off eBay, but you can find them for $5,500 to $6,500 typically. But the problem with those is that you're going to usually find an early code 20B. You're going to find a number code, you're going to find an A code 20B. Yes, you can find B and C and D series 20Bs for around the same price sometimes if you look hard enough and wait, but you're typically going to find the early code 20Bs, and I'll get into that issue a little bit later. But you're going to find typically engines that have been thrashed and abused, and you don't actually know the history. So when you buy the 20B, if you want to do the 20B swap right, you're going to want to take the motor and pull it apart and rebuild it immediately. That way you know for a fact when you slam it together, that $8,000 investment you've just made in the motor will work. You don't want, I don't know why you would blindly spend $6,500 and hope to God that the engine's correct. Because they're 27-year-old going on 30-year-old engines. You can't trust them. So you need to rebuild them once you get it immediately. Unless you can verify you got a fresh one, which fresh 20Bs are going to run $13,000 to $20,000 typically. You can't trust it. So you need to rebuild it immediately. So you're going to rebuild the engine, and typically after you rebuild, you're going to see the engine cost you roughly $8,000 to $13,000. If you do it yourself, you can get it probably in the $8,000 to $9,000 range. If you do a shop, at the minimum $13,000. You can go anywhere $13,000 to $15,000 depending if you get like your rotors balance and clearance and all this stuff. If you're doing all that stuff, you're gonna get more expensive. I'm talking about, it's pretty stockish, maybe like a street port or something like that. You're looking at $13,000 to $20,000 for the engine alone, period. Now, after the engine, if you get past the long block, we're gonna assume you're not using stock twins. After you get past the long block, you have to buy a turbo, the manifold, and all that stuff, your fuel to supply the turbo. Because when you're building an engine, you want to build it right the first time, not just throw a stock one together. When you're doing a swap into an RX7, obviously. So after you buy all your aftermarket support stuff, I mean, you're probably looking, if you say you have the $13,000, you'll say an $8,000 long block. Those are the cheapest way. $8,000 after manifold and turbo, you're probably around 12 to 13. Then you get an ECU. ECU for a 3-rotor is going to be 1,500 to 2,000. So now you're getting there. You're starting to get there. Now you're starting to see the point. On top of that, for an FD, you're going to need a front subframe to be replaced. You can modify the stock subframe, but then you're going to have hood clearance issues with the manifold and the intake manifold, and you don't want to deal with those. So you're going to have to actually. So we typically use the Hinson subframe kit and then get the appropriate suspension parts to make sure that everything works appropriately with the kit. And the Hinson front subframe kit is about $2,000. So I mean, you're already in that $20,000 range, and that's before you even get into any of the crazy modifications like your cooling and all that stuff. Like it's very expensive. So that's just putting in an FD. And an FC, you're gonna look at probably $15,000 give or take, because you don't have to buy a subframe, you don't have to buy mounts. But yeah, for a mildly modified 20B, you're looking at $20,000 just to put the engine into the car. Now, like I said, we're gonna run back. When we come back to when we're looking at these motors on eBay, they're $5,500 to $6,000. For an early code block, typically, like I said, you can find later codes for around the same price sometimes if you wait and look long enough. But typically, you're going to find the early codes and A codes, and that can be an issue itself. So now we're going to our second point. What are the engine codes? What do I mean when I'm talking about number codes, A codes, B codes, C codes, and D codes? 20Bs were divided up into 5 separate iterations. Each iteration is 1,000 engines, so they're labeled 0 to 999. So there's 0 to 999, there's A, 0 to 999, and then there's B and then C and D in each one of those. Now, people say that there's an E series of engine. No one has really seen them. No one's proved that they exist. People say that they exist. I have yet to see one, but that's a whole nother issue in itself. But basically, when you're looking at the early codes, the reason why the early code engines are a problem is because the earliest 20Bs had bad center irons. Similar to kind of like when you look at like an S4 T2 or an S5 T2, how the rear iron cracks on the dowel. It had the same problem with the 20B. As you added more power, the weak casting around the dowel would snap and break, and then you have a bad engine, and you have to get the center iron itself is very expensive. You're looking at $6,000 minimum for just the thick center iron itself, for a brand new one. For a used one, probably $3,000 to $5,000 for just the iron. That's after you spent $5,000 on the motor. So it's better that if you were to get an early code engine, that you stud it or you dowel it to make sure that it's strong. But that weak casting in the irons, and originally, that it was thought that the early series engines had the breakage of irons because the E shaft was weak and that it wobbled at high RPMs, and that wasn't the case. As we've researched more and more over time, people have found that it was the weak center iron casting. So the center iron actually was not fixed until the B series code engines. So that's after 2000 20Bs had rolled off the line. They didn't fix the center iron problem. So when you're looking for a 20B, your B and later 20Bs are going to be the most desirable engines due to their strength. Where a number and an A code block could barely hold for stock power, the B and newer series are way stronger. So if you're going to buy a 3-rotor, like I said, you're going to want to look for a later series engine at the minimum. You can get away with getting an early series engine, and you're gonna want to modify the engine to make it stronger. And there are several ways to do that. We can go over that in a later video. But I would highly recommend finding a B or later series engine, because you're off the bat you're gonna have a stronger engine. You can get away with stock tension bolts, stock studs, and all that stuff, and get away with it. That being said, if you do modify your engine, you can make plenty of power on an early engine block. For instance, our 20B we have is an A code. One of our 20Bs we have is an A code, made over 700 horsepower. At 18 pounds of boost, 730 to be specific, without any iron breakage. So it's perfectly possible. Now, this video is getting a little long, and I want to give you the last point before we end this one. But this is not a little known fact, but for rotor enthusiasts, it's a known fact. For not rotor enthusiasts, it's not. So where did the 20B engine come from? And as an RX7 community, or as an RX7 enthusiast, I get a lot of dumb questions, obviously. But one of the stupidest questions I get, maybe not the most stupidest, sorry, that might be a little harsh. One of the most ignorant questions I get is that people ask you, is your RX7 a 2-rotor or a 3-rotor? And I'm sure some of you guys have probably got this question as well, because people think that RX7s came from factory 3-rotors, and that it's a common modification. As I addressed earlier, it's not a common modification. But most people aren't aware of the 20B's origin, so where did they come from? The 20B came from a luxury car called the Mazda Cosmo. The car was introduced in 1990, and it was way ahead of its time. It was the first car to ever feature GPS satellite navigation. And it had many groundbreaking features like an LCD screen with climate control, and it was only available in Japan. And if you played like a game like Gran Turismo 2, the car was fucking dominant. The Cosmo is rated for 285 horsepower from the factory, weighed about 3,400 pounds. So when you compare that to an FD making 280 horsepower from the factory, weighing about 2,700 pounds, you can see the power difference. So when you look at the Cosmo, it's kind of sort of pretty much like the Lexus SC400 compared to the Supra from Mazda. So it had the bigger engine, it had more torque, all that stuff, but it was just a heavier car because they used the engine to compensate for the amount of power for the amount of weight that the car is moving. So that's why when you see the 20B get put in an RX-7, the car starts to fly. 20Bs make way more torque than the RX-7, than the 13B, and they hold a lot more power and they make a lot more power as well. So Cosmos aren't a popular car in tuning culture at all, but the engines are super popular. Like, they are a mainstay in tuning culture, and that's kind of why we're going to start a build series on a 1990 Unos Cosmo that has been recently imported from Japan. I'm currently in the process of picking one up. I'm gonna have it here probably in 2018, and we're gonna do a full build. So if you guys want to tune in and see that, check into our channel. I just secured funding for the car. We're gonna be picking it up from Texas here shortly. Full video series from beginning to end, so be ready for that. And in the next video in this series, we're gonna be talking about the 13B versus 20B, and going over modifications as well as what's needed to put the 20B into the RX-7. So, like I said, if you like this video, please subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them below. Also, little shout out and a little plug, is that we own Rotors Magazine is associated with a shop called Rotors Performance. We're a rotary shop located in Council Bluffs, Iowa. We build 20B engines regularly, build 13B engines regularly. We have an in-house dyno, tons of lifts, tons of RX-7s around the shop. If you're in the area, feel free to stop by anytime. You can find us on Facebook or Google. If you're interested in getting an engine rebuilt or need advice for your own build, don't hesitate to contact us on Facebook at Rotors Performance or Rotors Magazine. And yeah, so I hope you guys found this video informational. If you liked it, please let me know down in the comments below. If you know someone that says a stupid fucking thing about 20B, send them this video. And my name's Kenny McKee, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.